If Mom doesn't sign today, I'll sign for her. My oldest son's voice sliced through the ICU like a blade, cutting across the beeps of the monitor. I lay there with the oxygen tube deep in my nose, the IV biting my wrist, watching my oldest daughter step up, lipstick cold on her mouth, placing a pen in my hand. Just sign, Mom. Everything will be fine. My youngest daughter stood behind her brother, head bowed like she was crying, but her eyes stayed glued to the folder titled Asset Transfer and Inheritance Rights. Beside them, a stranger in a black suit opened his briefcase and set a seal on the table, ready to witness the moment they took their mother's estate. I looked at my 3 children, feeling hollow. None of them knew I had seen this day coming. I let the pen drop and heard the dry clink as metal hit the blanket. 3 faces froze at once. Because they had no idea the paper they were trying to force me to sign today was something I had made, permanently void a month ago. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. My name is Loretta Mae Ellison, 69, a widow for 12 years, living alone by Cedar Lake, a small town outside Kentucky where morning fog rests on the water and sparrows trade songs with church bells. I used to be a counseling teacher, then spent more than 2 decades building Haven Ridge Retreat, a place for women who lost their husbands, helping them find trust and peace again. I'm not rich in the usual sense, but Haven Ridge is my life's work, my years of being a mother, a wife, a woman who stood back up after grief. Now, in these later years, I thought the worst thing would be loneliness, until I realized the deepest wounds can come from people who share your last name. I woke under the cold white lights of the ICU, lines running across my arms, needles buried in my vein like creeping roots. The heart monitor blinked steadily. Each beep a reminder I was still alive, even if I wasn't sure any of my 3 children actually wanted that. At the head of the bed, Colin spoke quietly with the man in the black suit looked like a notary. I couldn't catch every word, but I knew Colin's tone, firm, transactional, the voice he used in real estate deals, not when talking to his mother. "I've prepared the forms," the man said. "Once she signs, I'll notarize immediately." Tessa, my oldest, always the organizer, set the pen in my hand, her voice gently fake. "It's just paperwork, Mom. Sign so we can handle everything for you and you won't have to stress." And Jenna, the youngest, stood at the foot of the bed, eyes rimmed red, speaking softly like comfort. "We just want you to feel at peace, Mom. It's just one signature." I looked at each of them, 3 faces that used to be my pride, now as distant as strangers. The way they stood close, traded looks, and spoke to me with half-sweet, half-cold voices told me this wasn't their first conversation about it. They had a plan. And today, I was. The final checkbox on their contract. I tried to lift my hand, but my body was weak, my fingers shaking. I felt the cold pen in my palm. "Hold it for her," someone said, probably Tessa. Another hand pressed lightly on my wrist. I heard Colin sigh like he was waiting on a deal that had dragged on too long. Then Jenna's voice near my ear. "Just sign, Mom. This will make everything better." Her tone was sweet, but I could hear the emptiness in each word. I didn't sign. I let the pen fall. The tiny sound metal on blanket seemed to echo in the silent room. All 3 of them stopped. Colin bit his lip. Tessa frowned. Jenna looked down. The notary cleared his throat and politely closed his briefcase. No one said another word. Then Colin muttered, "What a waste of time." I watched them leave one by one. No goodbye, no hand squeeze. Just the smell of antiseptic and the steady beeping of my heart. I breathed slowly, feeling a pain in my chest that wasn't from my heart, but from somewhere else deeper, older. I once thought nothing could hurt me more than losing my husband. But today I understood, the greatest pain isn't losing the person you love, it's watching the ones you gave life to turn their backs on dignity. When the nurse came in, I pretended to sleep. I needed time to piece things together. The name Cedar Lake surfaced where I've lived nearly 30 years, where I built Haven Ridge Retreat, a place for widows. I turned it into a safe home where hundreds of women learned to stand again after loss. Haven Ridge is my life's devotion, my memories, and my husband Jack's, who passed 12 years ago. I once thought I'd pass it to my children so they could continue the work. I believed in their goodness until I realized the only thing they saw in Haven Ridge wasn't its worth, but its value on paper. A month ago, when my breath felt shorter each day, I quietly met with attorney Naomi Keats, who had helped with donations and estate matters before. I told her I feared that if I ever fell ill, my kids wouldn't ask, "Are you okay, Mom?" "But what are you leaving?" Naomi didn't look surprised. She just met my eyes and said, "If you want to protect what you built, do it before they realize you're still clear-minded enough to act." The next day, I signed everything to transfer Haven Ridge Retreat to the Widow's Lantern Foundation, an independent nonprofit serving women who've lost loved ones. From that moment, Haven Ridge was no longer personal property. It belonged to the people who needed it most. None of my 3 children knew. I didn't plan to tell them, at least not yet. I still hoped I could find a bit of trust in them before revealing the truth. But tonight, when I heard Colin order, "Bring the notary in," I knew my silence had saved me. After they left, I lay still for a long time. The fluorescent light cast a cold glow, my shadow pooling on the white blanket. In the steel frame's reflection, my face looked pale, older than it should. But in my own eyes, I recognized something I'd lost: resolve. I'm no longer the mother who keeps her head down, afraid to lose her children's love. I'm Loretta, the woman who built a house of peace from the wreckage of her life. And I won't let anyone turn that legacy into a bargaining chip. I turned toward the IV line, took a deep breath, and whispered through a rough throat, "Kids, I've already prepared." When the nurse returned to adjust the machines, I closed my eyes again. But my mind was sharp with every word and step I'd take once I got out. I would document everything, the times, the words, the actions of each of them, so no one could twist the story. They think I'm just a confused old woman, a name on paperwork that's easy to replace. But they forgot, I'm the one who wrote all of this, and only I have the right to write the ending. The door they think opens to treasure has been locked for a long time. I hid the key where they'd never think to look, a place called justice. And when I leave this hospital, they'll learn that what they just tried to take hasn't been theirs for a long time. That afternoon, exactly 1 month before I was in that hospital bed, the lake was still as glass. I stood at the second-floor window, where late light spread like a gold cloth over the water. The pink-red glow slid across the pines and bounced off the glass, throwing back a face I knew yet felt distant, mine, more tired than ever. At 69, I've gotten used to my body slowing down. Every morning, climbing the stairs from the office to my small apartment above, my chest felt like an invisible hand was squeezing. The light pains on the left side came more often. At first I called it fatigue. I used to teach others to listen to their bodies, and when it was my turn, I pretended I couldn't hear. I kept moving, kept working, kept being strong, like it was my job. From that room, I could see the whole of Haven Ridge Retreat, the last 20 years of my life. White-painted cottages ringed the lavender garden, a gravel porch where widows meditated or journaled every morning. At the end of the stone path was the common room, the heart of Haven Ridge, where I brewed tea, baked, and listened as they spoke of their dead. Some sat in silence an hour and then burst into tears for the husband they lost. I sat beside them, saying nothing, just holding a hand. Sometimes comfort isn't words, it's someone patient enough to sit with you. I believed Haven Ridge was my life's calling. I led so many women through their darkest days, yet in that evening light, looking over the still water, I realized I was the one who hadn't left grief. I'd lived 2 decades among tears, lost stories, and memories of Jack who died on a snowy February morning. I built Havenridge to heal others, but accidentally locked myself inside a house of sorrow. I sat at the window desk and opened my laptop. The inbox overflowed, thank you notes from former guests, donor invites, financial reports, event newsletters. I skimmed past everything and stopped at drafts. One title glowed, Widow's Lantern. I'd typed it days ago and left it. The body held one sentence, I'm ready to do something that isn't about grief anymore. I don't remember why I wrote it, only that tears slid down before I noticed. Deep down, I knew I was tired of carrying everyone else's meaning, tired of being the strong one. That afternoon, Renee Porter stopped by. She's 58, Havenridge's director of care, the person I trust most. She set a warm box of waffles on my desk and smiled. Working this late again? I know you haven't eaten. I brushed it off, but she didn't. She sat and looked me straight in the eye. Loretta, I'm serious. You look weaker. Every time you climb the stairs, you grab the rail. You can't keep this up. I wanted to wave it away, say I was fine. But I saw real worry in her eyes. She lost her husband to cancer, tried to be tough the way I am now. She knows the price of caring for everyone else while forgetting yourself. She spoke slowly, like she didn't want me to fight her. It's time to rest, Loretta. Not because you're weak, because you've done enough. I was quiet. Outside, the light tilted. The lake turned amber. I watched the willows throw shadows on the water and thought of Jack. He planted them years ago, saying they'd grow up with Havenridge. They're tall now, shading the path. And I, the planter, have started to slow down, to drain out. Renee, I said softly, if I'm not here one day, what happens to Havenridge? She didn't answer right away. She set her hand on the desk and gently squeezed mine. I don't know. But I do know that if you collapse suddenly, this place loses its soul. The words tightened my chest. I knew. Better than anyone, Havenridge revolved around me. I signed every decision, approved every project, held every license. I meant to build a home for community, but I'd made it dependent on one person, me. That evening after Renee left, I sat in the dim until the hallway lights clicked on. I reopened the Widow's Lantern draft and stared at that single sentence. Screen light lifted the lines at my eyes. Maybe it was time to let Havenridge become something bigger than me, beyond a mother, a widow, a worn-out founder. I didn't want it to die with me. I wanted it to live after me. When I left, I paused at the main gate. The wooden sign had darkened with age. A breeze carried lavender and damp wood. From inside came laughter, women learning joy again. I closed my eyes and let that sound pass through like a goodbye. I knew something was different that evening. Not just the light, an unmistakable feeling that a chapter was closing. In the car, sunset flared in the rearview, almost too bright. I suddenly felt this might be my last time seeing Havenridge this way as an owner. Next time, it would be a legacy, no longer under my name. Back at my lakeside house, the light gilded the water. Tiny waves tossed gold onto the porch. I parked but didn't shut off the engine. In that moment, I knew, I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of leaving without protecting what matters. I went inside, switched on the lamp, opened my laptop, and found Naomi Keats's number, the attorney who'd helped with last year's charitable paperwork. My cursor hovered before I called. Loretta? I thought you'd clocked out for the day, she answered gently. Not yet, Naomi, I said. I'm just getting started. That night, I knew my decision was set. Under the warm desk light, I wrote one line in my notebook. Tomorrow, I'll give Havenridge to the people who need it before my children take it. Outside, the night had settled. A thin moon skimmed the lake. The glow was soft but steady, just like the feeling inside me. Quiet, not weak. I knew that evening sun was the sign of a beginning. The next morning I got to Haven Ridge earlier than usual. Fog still hugged Cedar Lake. The path in felt so still I could hear my shoes crunch the gravel. It was familiar and foreign, like walking through my own memory. Papers from the night before waited on my desk. I poured black tea, sat, and opened my contacts. Naomi's name appeared, note beneath it, Attorney Charitable and Community Assets. I took a long breath and called. "Loretta, I've been expecting you," Naomi said, warm but professional. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure," I said calmly. "I want a foundation not owned by anyone. It will carry on what Haven Ridge began." That afternoon I drove to Naomi's office in Lexington. Autumn leaves drifted over the hood, and I thought of what's fallen from my hands in this life. My husband, my youth, and now my trust in my children. But amid the losses, there was something I could still keep meaning. Naomi greeted me with a light smile and serious eyes that felt trustworthy. She poured coffee and spread clean pages across the table. "What will we call it?" she asked. I looked out the window at the rising sun flashing on the glass. I thought of the little candle we lit at memorials in Haven Ridge, the one cradled by widows' hands, symbolizing hope and strength after loss. "Widow's Lantern Foundation," I said. "The flame isn't just for the dead. It's for the living learning to go on." Naomi nodded and took notes. We worked for hours. She explained each clause: transfer of ownership, board structure, nonprofit bylaws, independent authority. I listened, noted, and signed each page like a farewell to a piece of my life. 2 witnesses came, Renee Porter, my trusted colleague, and Victor Lane, our longtime accountant. Both understood the weight of this moment and stayed quiet. No, one asked why. Only Renee's glances seemed to ask, "Are you sure?" I nodded. When Naomi finished the last clause, she looked up and said clearly, "As of today, all assets, land rights, facilities, and operational authority of Haven Ridge Retreat are legally transferred to the Widow's Lantern Foundation. No shares remain in your name, Loretta. More importantly, none are in your children's names." I went still. It felt like a seal pressed onto my old life. I was both relieved and empty, the same feeling as when I took off my wedding ring for the last time after Jack died. Part of my heart was released, the other part knew nothing would be the same. Naomi closed the file and slid me a notarized copy. "Keep this safe. I recommend a separate storage location, physical and digital, and tell no one until you truly want to." I smiled. "I understand. Some silences protect what's right." That evening it rained lightly in Cedar Lake. I turned on the lamp, opened the wall, safe I'd had installed, and placed every document transfer papers, foundation confirmations, witness list, bylaws into a moisture-proof envelope and locked it away. Then I photographed everything and uploaded it to a private cloud folder only Naomi and I could access. Holding those papers, I thought of my 3 children. Tessa, who calls herself the best manager in the family, Colin, who sees Haven Ridge as an asset with growth potential, and Jenna, the gentle youngest who quietly sides with the stronger voice. I love them, maybe always will, but trust between us cracked long ago. I once thought I could tell them that forming the foundation was to protect our family's work. Then I understood. When love is mixed with greed, explanations become kindling. I didn't tell them, not out of secrecy, but because the timing wasn't safe. Some decisions, if revealed too soon, are twisted before they can take root. I reminded myself, love doesn't mean handing over unconditional power. I'd raised them with such plenty they believed everything was theirs by default. Today, I'm relearning love, clear-eyed love that protects what must be protected. At 9 p.m., I closed the laptop and leaned back. The desk lamp threw my faint reflection onto the rain-streaked window, brown silver hair, lines like a map of time. A flicker of fear. If I don't wake up tomorrow, will anyone understand I did this not out of selfishness but to safeguard value? Then I smiled. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's doing the right thing while fear sits beside you. I drew the curtains and listened to rain on glass. The yellow light warmed the quiet room like a promise. I wrote the day's last line in my journal. Tonight I locked the door they'll try to pry open. I'm keeping the key, not to hide, but to wait for the right knock. Before bed, I typed a short email to the interim board of the Widow's Lantern Foundation Naomi's nominees. 2. Community psychologists, an independent financial advisor, and Renee Porter. I've completed the transfer. This foundation doesn't belong to me. It belongs to those who will need it. I am the starter, not the holder. I hit send. The tiny message sent successfully banner brought a strange swell in my chest, part sorrow, part peace. Outside, the rain eased. A silver streak skimmed the lake, reflecting the porch light. I closed the door slowly, carrying a quiet I hadn't felt in years. That night, Cedar Lake drowned in mist. I stood at the window, watched water run down the glass, and told myself, from now on, Havenridge isn't mine. But it will live, and the light from the widow's lantern will go on even when I'm gone. I don't remember when I collapsed. Maybe in the office. Maybe by the kitchen doorway where I make morning tea. I only know that when I opened my eyes, the room was all harsh white light, steady beeps, and the sharp smell of disinfectant, like waking inside a cold dream. I wanted to ask what happened, but my throat burned and only a rasp came out. A young nurse noticed I was awake and ran to get the doctor. They said things like transient cardiac ischemia, a few days of monitoring, lucky it wasn't too late. I nodded so they'd be at ease, but my mind was on something else. Do my kids know I'm here? The answer came fast. That afternoon, the door swung open. 3 familiar faces, Colin, Tessa, Jenna. With them, a stranger in a black suit carrying a leather case. "Oh my, Mom, you're awake!" Tessa blurted, half surprised, half awkward. She set a tiny bouquet on the table, but I saw it was plastic, the kind you grab from the gift shop by the elevators. "The doctor says you're past the danger point," Colin said, voice hard like a revenue report. "But you need to rest and avoid stress, so it's best we settle everything now." I squinted. "Settle what?" Jenna slid a chair close, holding my hand, her voice small. "Just a little paperwork, Mom. We'll help manage Havenridge so you won't face legal issues." Before I could respond, Colin signaled to the man to open the case. The metal latch clicked cold as ice. A thick stack landed on the bedside table. "This is a temporary power of attorney," Colin said. "Sign, and we'll handle the banks, donors, and agencies. You won't have to worry." I stared at the page's tiny print, signature tabs already marked. My eyes blurred, but instinct made me sharper than ever. This wasn't temporary. It was permanent. We should do it quickly. "Mom's weak," Tessa coaxed, voice so persuasive it felt foreign. "The notary is here. It'll take minutes." The man nodded. I felt the IV pinch, my throat close. The heart rate on the monitor ticked like a warning. I tried to speak but couldn't. My breath caught. My hand went numb. Colin lowered his voice to the girls. "Just get it done. She can't fight it. If we don't do it now, later will be too late." Tessa pressed the pen into my hand. "Just sign, Mom. You've worked your whole life. Let us take it from here." Jenna leaned closer, sweetness turning false. "Sign, Mom, so you can relax." I heard every word, every breath. My 3 kids, the ones who once argued over slices of my pie and called me a superhero when I kept us afloat after their dad died, now stood here not to care for me, but to take. I tried to lift my hand and only managed to hold the pen loosely. I felt a sting at the IV site and a chill rushing up my arm. Through the haze, I heard Tessa murmur, "Hold Mom's hand steady. Jenna's hand landed on my wrist, soft but firm. Colin stood at the foot of the bed, arms crossed, eyes indifferent. I let the pen fall. A small, dry click on white fabric. No one spoke for a few seconds. The air felt sucked out of the room. Colin inhaled hard and dropped a flat line. "Fine. If you don't want to, then rest. But don't say we didn't take care of things." Tessa picked up the pen and slipped it into her purse. She said, "Let's go," without looking back. Jenna was the last to step out, gently closing the door. I saw her lashes tremble, but I couldn't tell if it was from nerves or guilt. The door clicked shut, leaving me alone under the cold white lights and the steady beeps of the heart monitor. No scent of flowers, only antiseptic. I lay still as tears burned down my temples. I wasn't crying from weakness. I cried because I had seen this coming, and I had prepared for it. 3 days later, I could sit up. They removed the oxygen tube. A nurse helped me practice breathing and eat thin porridge. My body still hurt, but my mind was strangely clear. I asked to borrow a phone to call family, but I really wanted to call Renee. When she heard my voice, she froze. "Oh my God, Loretta, I just heard you got sick." And before I could get there, Colin called the office this morning. I gripped the phone. "What did he say?" "He said you're not well enough to work and that you agreed to let him temporarily run Haven Ridge. He said staff might need to help sign a few things while you recover." I closed my eyes and breathed deep. Anger rose, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I just felt sorry for the blindness that greed can plant in the children you raised. "Renee," I said softly, "I want everything left as is. No transfers, no new accounts, no one enters the office without me, okay?" "Of course," she answered quickly, firm. "I'll tell accounting and the team. They only take direction from you." I smiled weakly. "Thank you. And one more thing, remember, Haven Ridge isn't mine anymore. It belongs to the Widow's Lantern Foundation. All documents were transferred 3 weeks ago." There was a pause, then Renee gave a small laugh. "So you already did it. I had a feeling." "Yeah, I said. I just didn't think I'd see this day so soon." After the call, I asked the nurse to bring my handbag from the locker. I took out my phone and opened my private cloud folder. Everything was intact: signed PDFs, confirmation minutes, notarized copies. I opened a new note and typed slowly. June 4th, ICU. Colin brought a notary. Tessa assisted. Jenna present. Tried to force a power of attorney while patient on IV, not fully capable. I did not sign. No consent. No legal authorization. I saved the file, titled it ICU Forced Signature, and uploaded a copy to my backup cloud. Then I attached it to an email and sent it to Renee with the subject line, "In case needed." I set the phone down, leaned back on the pillow, and breathed deep. In the quiet room, I could hear the rain on the window and my heart beat slow, steady. I wasn't a woman lost in illness anymore. I had recorded my first piece of evidence, a legal fence strong enough to protect what I've built. I stared at the ceiling, the fluorescent light glinting off the IV line. Everything looked white, but inside me, a different light was growing. I knew that from this moment on, their efforts would be pointless. The door they're trying to open, I locked it long ago with keys called Law and Clarity. And I swore that once I left this room, I would never let anyone sign for me, never again. 3 days later, the doctor signed my discharge. He spoke gently but firmly. "Mrs. Loretta, your heart almost stopped. If you stay under stress or hide symptoms again, you won't be this lucky next time." I only smiled. To me, it wasn't an accident, it was a wake-up call. My body spoke before my spirit collapsed. Renee picked me up in her old silver car. She climbed out with my wool cardigan I'd left at the office and a small paper bag with hot soup, chamomile tea, and a few cookies. Seeing it made my heart sink, a simple care that didn't demand repayment. No contract, no terms, No signature. Just honest kindness. On the drive back to Cedar Lake, we barely spoke. Fog hung thick, catching the weak sunlight on every branch. I sat in the back seat, holding my medical file tight. The engine's hum was lulling, but my mind couldn't rest. In those 3 ICU days, I had repeated a list in my head what to do once I got home. When the car stopped at my house, I took a long breath. The small lakeside home was as quiet as the day I left, except the wind carried the damp smell of early autumn leaves. Renee helped me in, made tea, and reminded me, rest and don't touch work. I nodded, thanked her, waited for her to clear the driveway, then locked the door and pulled the key. The first thing I did wasn't rest. I went straight to the living room, bent down, and opened the cabinet under the bookshelf where the backup safe was hidden. The code still worked. When the soft click sounded, I almost held my breath. Inside, the original deeds transferring. Haven Ridge to the Widow's Lantern Foundation were stacked neatly, along with 2 witness confirmations and minutes from the interim board meeting. Nothing had moved. I carefully photographed each page, numbered them, and saved them to a hard drive in a separate cloud only Naomi Keats and I could access. Then I put everything back and locked the safe with a new code. This time I added another character, one more layer of comfort. I stood and looked around, everything familiar, yet distant. This home once echoed with my kids' voices at Christmas, now only wind slipped through the doorframe. I sat on the sofa and checked my phone. 3 new messages. Tessa, rest up, Mom, don't overthink. I'll visit soon. Colin, let's talk this weekend, Mom. A few things need your confirmation. Jenna, not a word. I stared at the 3 lines, and a chill ran through me. Each text sounded caring, but I heard the voice of interest and the patience of a plan not yet complete. I set the phone down and poured more tea. The chamomile rose light and sweet, but it couldn't lift the weight in my chest. That afternoon, I opened my laptop to check the work inbox. Hundreds of unread emails. One subject jumped out. Legal advisory appointment confirmation. I opened it. My heart thudded. It read, appointment between Loretta Ellison and legal advisor for Haven Ridge Retreat confirmed for 10 o'clock Friday morning. Below it was an electronic signature from Colin. He had impersonated me. Attached was a draft temporary power of attorney, the same thing I refused to sign in the ICU. Maybe any parent knows the unique pain of being betrayed by your own child. I still ask myself, do you believe love has limits? Tell me how you feel in the comments. I read each one like a new chapter in this life. I closed my eyes, counted to 3, and opened them again. No trembling, no fear, just a cold clarity. I hit forward and sent it to the entire interim board of the Widow's Lantern Foundation. In the body, I wrote, please reconfirm the governance structure. As of May 12th, all management authority for Haven Ridge Retreat belongs solely to the Widow's Lantern Foundation. No member of my family holds any position or legal authority. Any requests or contacts contrary to policy should be reported to me and attorney Naomi Keats. I attached the organizational charter, signed electronically, and sent it. When message sent successfully appeared, I exhaled. Once more, the door they tried to pry shut itself tighter. Evening came on. Late light streamed through the window onto the wooden table where I keep my old notebook. The cover was worn, the first pages still stained with old coffee. I opened it and wrote, clearly, June 4th ICU. Colin called a notary, brought power of attorney papers. Tessa assisted. Jenna stood by. They said Mom should sign for peace of mind. I did not sign. Then Colin left, irritated. Tessa packed the files. Jenna said nothing. All remembered. I paused, dotted the page, then added, I never thought I'd have to write this. But it's necessary to protect the truth if I can't speak. I closed the notebook, pulled a separate page, an action list, and numbered it. 1. Call Naomi Keats, confirm Haven Ridge's legal status. 2. Notify the board about Colin's impersonation. 3. Contact installers, set up a home camera system. 4. Update medical directive, remove decision rights from the kids. 5. Change emergency contact to Renee and Naomi. 6. Cancel the old power of attorney I granted years ago. Each time I finished a line, I drew a firm stroke through it. It felt like locking every door and sealing every gap they might slip through. I worked until dark, the warm lamp spreading a soft band across the table. Outside, the lake caught the distant glow of neighbors' lights. I stood, pulled the curtains, and saw my reflection in the glass, small but steady. Before bed, I wrote another letter by hand. Thick cream paper, my handwriting shaky but clear. Dear Naomi, if one day I lose capacity, open this envelope. Inside are journals, notes, and legal evidence of my children's recent actions. I trust you to protect the truth. Sincerely, Loretta M. Ellison. I sealed it and wrote on the front, open only if Loretta loses capacity. I placed it in the wall safe with a copy of my ID and an asset list. Done. I turned off the lights, leaving a small one on the bookshelf. In the quiet house, the ticking clock sounded like the heartbeat of resolve. I wrapped myself in the cardigan Renee brought and sat by the window, looking out at the dark lake. Everything seemed asleep, but I knew the real fight had just begun. And this time, I would not fight with tears, but with evidence, with the law, and with the calm of a mother who used to trust too easily and has finally learned to trust herself. That Sunday, the Cedar Lake sky was cold and gray, no sun, just a breeze through the pines by the porch. I'd just poured tea when I heard an engine settle in the driveway, the low growl of a black SUV, the kind Colin uses for important meetings. My heart beat slow, not surprised. I knew the vague discussion from their weekend texts had arrived. The engine cut, doors opened in near unison. Colin stepped out first, white shirt buttoned to the collar, dark suit, shoes polished to a mirror in the dim noon light. He adjusted his tie, the habit he has before a deal. With Colin, everything is transactional, including family. Behind him came Tessa, hair in a tight bun, sunglasses covering half her face, though there was no sun. On her left was Jenna, the youngest, carrying a reusable water bottle, soft sweater, expression calm to the point of artificial. Watching them approach my door felt less like a visit to Mom and more like a shareholders' meeting. I opened the door before they could knock. "Come in," I said evenly. Colin walked straight in without a greeting. Tessa pressed her lips together. Jenna tried a stiff smile. They sat on the sofa while I stayed standing, keeping distance. "We need to talk," Colin began, placing a navy folder on the coffee table and sliding it toward me with a deliberate calm. "Just a few items to review: power of attorney, medical decision rights, co-managed accounts, and a shared benefit structure for Haven Ridge. We've organized everything." I looked at the stack and didn't touch it. Light from the window flashed off the cover stamped "Legal Draft." I didn't need to open it to know what was inside a replay of what they tried in the hospital. Tessa leaned in, voice smooth like a presentation. "This is just temporary, so things stay stable. If it feels unnecessary later, you can revoke it." Jenna, beside her, dipped her head and added softly, "If you sign, everyone can relax. I know you're tired, but this is for everyone's good." I stayed silent. In that moment, I could hear the wall clock tick, each second dropping into the air. I reached out and pulled the folder close, opened the first tab. Dense legal phrases stared back: durable power of attorney, shared asset authorization, healthcare decision rights highlighted in yellow, ready for a signature. I turned each page slowly. It felt like reading an indictment written by my own children. At the last page, I closed it, set it back where it was, and said plainly, "No." Colin arched a brow. "You haven't read it fully." "I've read enough," I said, calm, low, but clear. The answer is no. The room froze. Tessa glanced at Colin, signaling. He leaned back and shifted tone. I don't think you're fully clear-headed. The doctor said you need rest and no stress. Are you sure you understand everything that's happening? I looked him in the eye. I'm clear enough to know trust has broken, and once it's broken, no. Paperwork fixes it. Jenna squeezed her bottle and stared down. Tessa exhaled sharply, trying to stay composed, fingers rubbing the purse edge, eyes unsteady. Colin braced his elbows on his knees, leaning toward me. I don't want to argue, but you're making this harder. This is about Havenridge, the family's asset. If you keep this stance, I'll have to find another way to protect it. Understood? I answered slowly, each word touching the air. Colin, Havenridge doesn't need protection from me. It needs protection from my children's greed. Silence fell. Outside, a draft lifted the curtain. I stood and walked to the door. This conversation ends here, I said, hand on the knob. If you truly want to care for me, start by respecting my answer. Tessa shot up. You're just pushing us away. You've changed. You're not the mom I knew. I turned back, eyes gentle but firm. Maybe you never knew who I really was. You only knew the mother who yielded, nodded, and endured. She's gone. The room went quiet. Jenna leaned forward like she might speak, then stopped. Colin grabbed his briefcase, face set like stone. Through his teeth, he said, "We won't give up." I nodded lightly. I know. Then I opened the door. My 3 children walked out without looking back. The door shut with a small, dry click that echoed. A boundary had been drawn between love and control, between the mother they were used to and the woman they can't bend. I stood a few seconds with my hand on the knob, listening as the SUV's engine faded down the leaf-strewn road. When the sound was gone, I let go and headed to the kitchen. On the counter, my morning tea had gone cold. I added hot water. The scent rose and drifted into the quiet. With both hands around the mug, I noticed they were shaking, but not from fear. For the first time in years, they trembled with relief. Not relief from winning, but from choosing my voice over. Compliance. I no longer needed to keep the peace, no longer needed to use endurance as a shield. I sat and looked out the window. Cedar Lake mirrored thin clouds. Nothing outside had changed, but I knew everything inside me had. I had stepped across a line, not loud, not dramatic, just a steady no strong enough to reclaim the rest of my life. And sometimes a woman's greatest strength isn't in the shout, it's in the moment she smiles and looks straight at the people telling her to be quiet. Last Sunday was the boundary line, and Monday morning the mailman brought the first strike. On the porch lay a large white envelope stamped with the law firm Colin likes to hire. I used a letter opener. Inside, an emergency petition for guardianship filed in County Family Court. Petitioner, Colin Ellison. Supporter, Tessa. Witness, Jenna. The summary was cold as stone. Mrs. Loretta is unstable, easily influenced, needs a representative. I read it all, closed it, and set it on the table like closing a door. I didn't call the kids. I dialed Naomi Keats. Loretta, I expected this, Naomi said evenly. We respond now. I don't want a circus, I said, but I won't hand myself to greed. Then we use facts, she replied. Start with a timeline. That afternoon, I brought my notebook, phone, and a box of files to Naomi's office. On the glass board, she wrote key points: ICU, June 4th, impersonation email, Havenridge transfer May 12th, cameras 2 weeks ago. I provided the texts: Tessa's rest up, Colin's talk this weekend, and Jenna's silence. Naomi nodded. Silence, after a forced signature attempt, is still data. We pulled images of the originals, transfer deeds, witness confirmations. I opened the cloud note. ICU force signature. Colin brought a notary. Tessa assisted. Jenna present. Patient on IV. No signature. Naomi asked me to write a first-person statement describing sounds, words, feelings. Courts don't just read statutes, she said. They read people. The next day, Naomi contacted Haven Ridge. Renee sent gate camera footage. Colin tried to badge into operations and was stopped by security. We numbered, time-stamped, and indexed the exhibits. Naomi concluded, "The strategy is to show a systematic manipulation pattern, impersonation, staging, exploiting illness, attempted facility access." I nodded, heart steadying. I got home late. On the porch sat a tray of banana bread wrapped in parchment with a note, "Eat and rest. I stopped by but missed you. Jenna." The smell of ripe banana, butter, and cinnamon pulled me back to when she baked with me. I didn't open the door. I didn't text back. I set the tray in the kitchen and covered it. Love isn't dead, but it no longer drives my decisions. That night I wrote a small declaration in my journal, saying no isn't cruel, saying no is building a fence around the replay day. A heart, so love isn't used as a shortcut to the vault. When I set down the pen, my breath felt lighter. In the days that followed, we sprinted. Naomi prepared a thick response, a motion to dismiss, a statement from my cardiologist, confirming capacity, the new medical directive, my cancellation of the old power of attorney, a letter from the Widow's Lantern Board confirming governance, and the full digital log. I checked every error, questioned every comma. Naomi smiled. "I appreciate your precision." Friday afternoon, the response was filed. On the courthouse steps, Naomi said, "From here, you shift from defense to offense. They shoved us onto the field. Now we choose the rules." The words clicked a latch in my chest. That weekend, I cleaned house like a recovery ritual. I gathered old magazines, reset picture frames, wiped sills, each drawer arranged like an argument. Orderly, clear, no room for clutter. I opened windows to let fall air in, damp wood mixing with lemon. Oil. I brought in the wind chimes. I no longer needed to fill the silence with noise. At night, I didn't stand guard. Passing cars didn't startle me. Shadows across the lawn didn't send me to the curtains. Under warm light, I reread our filing, holding it like a map. I know where I am and where I'm going. Sunday morning, I carried the bread to the porch. The top had dried, but the scent remained. I cut a slice and brewed tea. I wasn't angry at Jenna, just sad she stood on the fence so long. Sad, but not weak. I bagged the rest and texted Renee, "Pick up when you can. Give to the night shift." I don't eat much sugar. An hour later, the tray was gone, with a note left behind. "Got it. R." At noon, Naomi called. "Court received it. Preliminary hearing next week." "I'll send the schedule." I thanked her and set the phone down. Out in the yard, I clipped lavender and set it in a chipped ceramic vase. The scent filled the kitchen and seeped down the hall. I understood that for years I fed life in others while forgetting to feed life in my own home. Toward evening, I dragged an old cedar chest to the center of the living room. Inside, Jack's letters, cassette tapes of the kids singing, receipts from Haven Ridge's opening days. I didn't burn or toss them. I organized, tied fresh ribbon, and labeled, "Keep not for bargaining. Keep what needs keeping. Let go of the rest. That's how I'll live again." The sun dropped behind the pines, the house washed in a soft blue. I flipped on the porch light, its glow falling across the gray stone path. I realized I wasn't afraid of footsteps anymore. If anyone comes, this door opens on my terms. Inside, there is order. Inside, there is a fence. Night settled. I sat at the table and wrote one more line. "I won't prove anything with tears. I'll prove it with timestamps, names, signatures. I'm not asking for pity. I'm asking for respect. My peace doesn't hang on someone else's mood." Wind drifted off the lake. I closed the journal and dimmed the lights, leaving one in the kitchen. That small glow pushed back just enough dark like the widow's lantern I named the foundation after. I walked room to room, touching the wood, listening to the house breathe. In that rhythm, I knew I'd left the fragile shore and stepped onto the solid one. The next morning, the mailman knocked again. No heavy envelope this time, just ads. I brewed tea and opened a window. The Cedar Lake sky was clearer than usual. In my chest, space opened not to run, but to move forward. That morning, the sky over Cedar Lake was startlingly clear. I stood at the mirror and smoothed the sleeves of my navy coat, the one I wore at those first Haven Ridge fundraisers, when I could drive across 3 states to raise support for widows with nowhere to go. I chose it not to look strong, but to remember who I am, the woman who once stood at a podium and spoke plainly about value, trust, and how a woman can rebuild her life with 2 trembling hands. The county courthouse sits downtown, a small red brick building with an old dome. Inside, early light streamed through tall windows and lay across the wooden benches like a thin layer of time. I walked slowly, each step treading on years of wounds caused by my own kin. Colin was already there with his attorney, dark suit, composed face like he was the one responsible for everything. Tessa sat beside him, flipping through files. Jenna kept her head down, fingers intertwined, avoiding my eyes. I took a breath and sat across from them next to Naomi. "You okay?" she whispered. "I am," I said. "I just want to hear everything clearly this time and not let anyone speak over my voice." When the judge entered, everyone stood. She was a woman in her early 60s, gray hair in a neat bun, eyes stern but not cold. Her voice was soft yet firm. Temporary guardianship, hearing the matter of Colin Ellison versus Loretta Mae Ellison. On the other side, Colin's attorney stood first and opened the file. His voice was smooth, precise, with a hint of fake regret. "Your Honor, my client only wants to protect his mother. Recently, she has shown signs of cognitive decline and is easily influenced by outsiders, especially Haven Ridge staff. Her decision to transfer all assets to a non-profit run by others indicates impaired judgment." Each word "decline," easily influenced, dropped and made my chest heavier, but my face stayed calm. I didn't need to argue with emotion. I only needed the facts. When it was our turn, Naomi rose. She didn't raise her voice. She just opened each file and presented them in order. "Your Honor, we submit medical records from Cedar Lake Hospital confirming that Mrs. Loretta has no signs of cognitive disorder. Her cardiac condition is stable, and her reflexes and logical reasoning are fully intact." She pulled up a slide on the small screen. A photo of me in the ICU with an IV, and at the bedside, Colin and 2 women images taken from the hospital camera. She continued, steady. "We are also submitting notes, Mrs. Loretta recorded herself, autosaved to the cloud at the time of the incident. It states, Colin brought a notary, tried to force a power of attorney while the patient was on an IV, no consent." A small camera click sounded from the back row. I glanced at my son, his face unchanged, but his hands were clenched, knuckles white. Naomi moved to the 3rd piece of evidence. Security footage at Haven Ridge on May 22nd shows Mr. Colin Ellison attempting to use an employee badge to enter the administrative area despite having his access revoked. "We have a written security report." She paused, then unfolded a sheet of paper and read each word clearly. "From Mrs. Loretta's letter to the Widow's Lantern Foundation board. The court doesn't need to protect me from strangers but from my play. Family's illusion of inheritance rights." The courtroom went silent. Only the judge's pen tapped the bench. I saw Jenna turn away, her shoulders trembling slightly. Tessa sat straighter, lips pressed tight, and Colin stared at the table like a man calculating his next move. The judge signaled for me to stand. "Mrs. Loretta, would you like to speak before we recess for deliberation?" I stood with my hands lightly clasped, steadying myself. The room felt smaller, only breath and heartbeat left. I spoke slowly, each sentence clear. I didn't come here to fight over anything. I only want the peace I worked my whole life to have. I am clear-minded. I know exactly what I'm doing, and I don't need anyone to decide for me. I'm not afraid of being alone. I'm afraid of being lived for by people who no longer see me as a person, but as an inheritance. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried through the wood-paneled room. The judge looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slightly. "Thank you, Mrs. Loretta." She called a brief recess and then announced, "The court will recess to review all evidence. A written ruling will be issued in the coming days." When the gavel tapped softly, I drew a deep breath. I didn't feel victorious, and I didn't feel afraid. I just felt steady in the truest sense. Not standing on arguments, but on my own name. Across the aisle, Colin packed his files without a word. Tessa avoided my eyes. Jenna walked slowly behind them, glancing back once eyes wet, half wanting to speak, half afraid to. I gave a small nod. No hatred, no blame. I knew I couldn't save people who don't want to wake up. Outside, noon light fell across the brick walkway. Naomi walked beside me in silence until we reached the lot. She set a hand on my shoulder and said softly, "Whatever the outcome, you reclaimed your name today." I smiled. "And that name," I said, "won't be used to sign for anyone else again." 2 days later, the mailman came again. This time the envelope was thicker, but it didn't feel threatening. I sat at the kitchen table, poured tea, and opened it slowly. Cedar Lake County Court Notice of Ruling. After reviewing all evidence, the petitioner's emergency guardianship request is denied in full. The court notes indications of financial manipulation by involved individuals and refers the matter to civil authorities for further investigation. I set the letter on the table and watched the steam rise from my tea. No gloating, no tension, just a thin but true line of peace running through me. I murmured to myself, "No one can give you your freedom back if you don't unlock it yourself." Midday light came through the window and fell across the page with my name in bold, no strike-throughs, no footnotes. I ran a hand over the words, Loretta Mae Ellison. For the first time in months, I felt my name whole again, not in a complaint, not on a power of attorney form, not in a guardianship file, but in my actual life. I folded the letter and set it beside the warm cup. The mist of steam mixed with the early afternoon light, so light it was almost transparent. I knew the fight wasn't entirely over, but I had won the most important part. I was no longer a victim of my own blind love. I decided not to cancel Legacy Evening, the event I'd scheduled to honor those who had walked with Havenridge, but I changed the guest list. No Ellison name tags, and no donors who like posing with oversized checks. I pulled out my old address book, made calls, and handwrote invites to people who'd been overlooked when Havenridge got too glossy, the high school teachers in town, the retired nurses who once asked to borrow the common room for a support group but were turned away for not meeting criteria, the shelter coordinator for abused women, the one who emailed me 4 times and then gave up. On each card, I wrote the same line in a slightly shaky blue ink. Havenridge is no longer my family's asset. It belongs to those who need it. Hope to see you at Legacy Evening. Some called back right away, voices trembling with disbelief. Others sent a simple, "Thank you for remembering us," and some were silent for days before replying, as if they needed time to believe that a long-closed door had opened. I didn't push. A good door is one people choose to walk through. News of the ruling spread faster than I expected. Colin found out by late afternoon. 3 days before the event, he stood at the top of my driveway, hands in his pockets, no car, no briefcase, just a rare pale look. I opened the door and stood on the porch. He didn't ask to come in. "I want to ask one thing," he said, staring at a slash of sunlight on the step. "Are you throwing away our family's shared vision?" I answered. "Our family never had a shared vision for Havenridge, Colin. You had a vision of assets. I had a vision of meaning." I paused, then said slowly, "I no longer confuse love with blind loyalty. I did for too long." Colin pressed his lips until I could see his jaw go tight. He said nothing more, and turned away like a man who'd missed his train. I watched his shadow stretch across the grass, then break as he turned the corner. I felt no triumph, only calm, as if we had finally spoken in our real language. The language of boundaries. On Legacy evening, a soft wind moved over Cedar Lake. I arrived early to check the steel frame greenhouse out back where I wanted dinner to be. String lights looped above, reflecting in small glints on a long table draped in a sandy linen cloth. We laid out simple china and a well-worn set of flatware. No elaborate flowers, just a few sprigs of lavender and rosemary in rinsed jam jars. On each plate I placed a small handwritten note, "You belong here." It was almost blunt in its simplicity, but I wanted it unconditional. I've seen too many doors that say, "Welcome," with lines of fine print underneath. "If, as long as," on the condition that Havenridge had been like that at times. Tonight I corrected it with one short sentence. Guests trickled in, then filled the room. A silver-haired teacher arrived with a boy whose chin carried a long scar. I remembered him nodding off in the meditation room after a week without a place to sleep. A retired nurse came with a cane and chose a chair near the window. The shelter coordinator came late, out of breath but smiling. "Thank you for the invitation and for the acknowledgement. No family names on the list." I opened one door and closed another. When everyone was seated, I stepped to the small mic at the head of the table. I hadn't prepared a speech. I only knew there was one thing I needed to say, clearly. "Tonight," I began, "isn't to tally credit or blame, isn't to brag about what Havenridge has done or excuse what it hasn't. Tonight is so I can finally say what I should have said long ago: Havenridge is no longer my family's." The greenhouse went so quiet I could hear a draft slip under the door. I opened a brown envelope and took out the transfer deed and a fresh confirmation letter. My voice didn't shake. I officially announce the land and facilities of Havenridge have been transferred to the Cedar Lake Community Trust, an independent community fund. No inheritance, no reversal. No fine print, no back door. From today on, the key holder is this community. For a few seconds, nobody clapped. Not because they weren't glad, because respect rarely makes noise. Then slowly, one person stood. Then a second, a third. They didn't cheer or shout my name. They just stood with damp eyes and hands at their sides, as if greeting something that had been taken from them for too long. I bowed my head. I didn't need anything more. Dinner moved gently after that. Pumpkin soup, toasted bread, apple salad, simple dishes meant for sharing. I walked the aisles, nodding and touching the shoulders of people who had come to Havenridge on very hard days. A mailman told me his wife once sat upstairs in the library and read aloud their son's last letter from the service. A grandmother raising 2 grandkids said sometimes all she needed was a place to sit and cry without someone rushing a tissue into her hand to make her stop. In that moment I understood. I hadn't abandoned Havenridge. I had returned it to its rightful owners. When most guests had gone, I took one last walk to say goodbye to Havenridge, not the building, but the old version of myself there. I went into the library, low shelves, paper and pine. I rested my hand on the spine of On Grief and Grieving, remembering the line, "Loss isn't something to get over, it's something we learn to carry." I went down to the meditation room, gray mats, the sound of wind against glass. I sat on the floor, closed my eyes, and listened to my heartbeat. Then I climbed the wooden stairs, the ones that creaked every morning when I carried a hot mug past. The hall light cast a long yellow strip like a road from youth to now. "Thank you," I whispered as if to a friend. I turned out most of the lights and locked the door. The new keys belonged to the Cedar Lake Community Trust, but tonight I was the one to close up, just once more. Back home, the porch light fell across the kitchen counter. A small sealed envelope sat there with no name. I opened it. Inside was a single slip of paper, Tessa's handwriting clear but hesitant. "I don't understand. Maybe I can't yet, but I'm sorry." No long explanation, no defense. Just 3 words that meant what they meant. I leaned against the counter and read it a few times. The pain didn't vanish, but its hard edge softened. I folded the note and put it in the 3rd drawer, the one for not to decide today. Not forgiving yet, but hurting less. I poured a glass of water and looked out at the lake. The quiet was clean, like rain had washed a film of dust from the porch. I turned off the kitchen light and left a small one by the window, the old habit that says the house is awake for those who need it. But tonight I knew that light wasn't for my kids to come back and take something, it was to light the next part of my life, living without debt to anyone's expectations. I sat by the window and opened my notebook. The last line of the day flowed easily without the catch of the past weeks. Haven Ridge has gone back to the people who need it. I've gone back to myself. I closed the book and listened to the house breathe slow and deep. Outside, wind moved through the pines with a faint trace of lavender from my coat. I rested my head and knew that from here on, I didn't have to guard a gate. My work was to plant a garden again in the house, in my mind, in ordinary mornings. And that night, for the first time in months, sleep came as lightly as a letter with no conditions. A few days after Legacy Evening, the mailman knocked again. No law firm envelope, no court seal, just a cream-colored letter, corners a little curled like it had ridden in many pockets. I looked at the addressee, Loretta Mae Ellison, then turned it over. Colin. My hand paused. I pulled out a chair, poured tea, and opened it slowly so the paper wouldn't tear, as if one rough move might break whatever thin thing sat inside. "Mom, I saw the transfer files earlier through public records and a few conversations around the cafe near the foundation building. I thought you would change your mind like before. I waited for you to give in. I trusted that habit more than I trusted you. Today I understand. You have the right to do what you believe is right, even if there's no place for me in it. I'm not asking for anything. I'm only acknowledging you're right. Colin. No, I'm sorry. No, please forgive me. Just a blunt, almost awkward, acknowledgement that I have the right." I folded the letter and set it by my tea. Outside, the lake rippled lightly. I didn't cry. Maybe because my tears had turned into a different kind of quiet, a quiet with firm edges, the kind that knows the difference between genuine feeling and an attempt to steer the story. I called Renee and recited it line by line. She was silent for a moment, then said, "Tessa stopped by Haven Ridge last night. Didn't ask to go into the office, just stood outside the glass. I opened the door and she said, 'No, I just want to stand here a minute.' She talked less than usual. I think something settled. Our hearts need a solid bottom to stand on before we can say decent things," I said. We didn't dissect it further. I shifted to Joyce's new pottery class for elder caregivers, a 65-year-old woman leading it. Renee's voice warmed. "They're calling it a weekly pot-making night, not therapy. If you're free Friday, come. Bye." I laughed. "I will. I do have days now with no meetings." That afternoon I went to the Haven Ridge community room, the one I'd walked through 1,000 times with a to-do list nailed into my brain. Today I sat in the back row with no role, no title, just a woman who wanted to listen. In front, a gray-haired woman rested her hands on her knees and began. She divorced after 30 years of marriage. No sobbing, no rage, just a voice smoothed by weather. Husband gone, kids chose silence, friends thinned like fog. "I thought I'd die of loneliness," she said, "but I didn't." And one morning I realized the kitchen still had room for a wooden spoon hitting a pan, like the pan was telling me, cook anyway. If no one eats today, then eat it tomorrow. When our eyes met by chance, I nodded. She nodded back, understanding without words. In that nod, I heard a hinge open a little inside me. No fanfare, no trumpets, just accepting that breathing is an act too. The greed. Next day, I walked the lake trail. I used to rush at fast steps, eyes on the watch, counting minutes until I had to be at the office, mind sorting the to-dos. This morning I slowed, stopped by petunias still holding dew, listened to ducks call under the dock, watched the sunlight powder the water like cinnamon on a latte. I thought, maybe I grew old here, but I'm also growing young here, in the way of people no longer crushed by meeting schedules. Back home, I pulled a sticky note from the drawer, wrote with a black marker, and stuck it on the fridge. I am not an asset to be managed. I chuckled. Funny how a line in court can feel cold as steel, but on a fridge it warms up like butter melting in a pan. Maybe that's because the kitchen is where we begin again, where we feed life instead of managing it. At noon, I sat by the window and opened my journal. I wrote the chapter I'd avoided, learning to be alone without being lonely. I didn't lecture, just noted. Small footprints. Brew a pot of tea just for me, but pour it in a pretty cup like when guests are here. Play Jack's old music. Don't rush to turn it off when memory stings. Allow myself not to reply right away, even to kind messages. Replant 3 rosemary bushes, not to cook more, but to rub the leaves and remember I still have sense to live by. Walk the lake every day. No 2 laps need to be the same. I wrote until my hand tired, then leaned back. In the quiet, I notice the sadness still echoes. It passes through the living room, bounces off the glass, even slips into the drawer with Tessa's envelope, but it doesn't run the house anymore. It's a guest who now wipes its feet, sits on the edge of the chair, and leaves on time. At dusk, my phone buzzed. Renee sent a photo. Women laughing, hands covered in clay. She typed, "Joyce says every pot keeps the maker's mistake on purpose. The flaw stays to remind you this vessel came from your own hands." I snapped a picture of the fridge and sent it back, the note that says, "I am not an asset to be managed." Renee hearted it, then called, "Coming to pottery tomorrow?" "I am," I said. "I want to make a pot with my own mistake in it." That night I roasted honey, carrots, and salmon, the simplest dish I know. I plated it on china and tucked a rosemary sprig on top, like I used to when guests came. Then I served myself, ate, and cleaned up. It had been a long time since the house had someone eating dinner without needing to talk about anything important. Before bed, I slid open the 3rd drawer and reread Tessa's note. "I don't understand. Maybe I can't yet, but I'm sorry." This time, "I'm sorry," didn't prick like a needle. It touched and left a small, warm trace. I put it back, the "not today, things should stay where they are." The next morning brought light rain. I put on a coat and knit hat and walked the lake. Wet earth smelled like memories, freshly rinsed. I stood under an oak and listened to the rain on its leaves. Before, I would have used the rain to squeeze in a remote meeting, send emails, update a budget. Now I stood still. I let the rain teach me water's lesson. It falls. It soaks. It doesn't ask permission. Back home, I dried my shoes, put the kettle on, and opened Colin's letter once more. I saw what I'd missed at first. He wasn't asking for anything, and in his clumsy way, he had handed control back where it belongs, to me. A second hinge opened inside, not for anyone to walk through right away, but so the light could step in first. In the afternoon, I stopped by the community room again. The woman who divorced after 30 years spotted me and lifted her hand like you would to a familiar neighbor. We didn't speak. We shared the same room and the same quiet. When we stood, eyes met, and we nodded again. That was enough to know my body was beginning to trust this new peace. After dark, I turned on the porch light and wrote. The words didn't snag anymore. I recorded the fridge note, the walk in the rain, the decision not to call back even after a long message. I added one line to close the chapter. My victory is that I'm not afraid anymore. Not afraid of being called selfish for holding the key to my own life. Not afraid of quiet. Not afraid of seeing my own mistake in the clay pot I'll make tomorrow. Not afraid of closed doors because I know I still have plenty of windows. At Cedar Lake, wind off the water reminded me to draw the curtains. I stood and looked through the glass, my reflection faded, then returned in the kitchen light. I told myself, just like in court and on legacy night, my name is still there, clear and whole, and from tonight on, every breath in this house carries the name Loretta. Not the name of a family line, not the label of a facility, but the mark of a woman who stopped at the right time to step forward the right way. That morning, Cedar Lake was bright, the sunlight like a thin glaze over the water. I put on the cardigan Renee brought and walked the path behind the pines. Joyce's pottery studio sat in an old wooden house by the greenhouse, door painted gray-blue, big windows like a curtain drawn back. Joyce joined Havenridge a few months ago, hair silvered and tied back, voice husky warm like ginger tea. She insists on calling the class, "Make something only your hands can make," not therapy, and not a program. Because everyone has their own flaw, Joyce says. And that flaw is what makes the pot theirs. I didn't go in yet. I stood outside with my hands in my pockets and looked through a film of dust on the glass. Inside, women gathered around wheels, clay wet and shining. Their laughs were small, the kind that touch the corners of the mouth, free laughs you can recognize without sound. One woman slipped and warped the rim. Instead of sighing, she tilted her head and chuckled, like the pot had spoken. Joyce passed behind her, didn't fix it, just touched the back of her hand and whispered something that made everyone smile. I stayed there a long while, filled with the smell of damp clay and sun dust. Something warm rose in me, but without hurry. Along the porch, I stopped at a stone bench under a maple. On its face, someone had chiseled a line, each stroke deliberate. No one gives your voice back, you take it. I traced the carving. The stone was cold, the words were cold, but the meaning was warm. I had made a long circle to understand this in my own way. In court that day, I spoke a little louder. Now, I don't need volume. I'm using that voice to set my life in order, drawer by drawer, meal by meal, breath by breath. Back home, I brewed tea and opened Colin's letter again. Not to hurt myself, and not to search for an apology that isn't there. I just wanted to see it clearly. He acknowledged my right. That's enough for today. I don't burn the sign. Letter. I fold it and slip it into the cloth-bound notebook. I labeled "Writing About Me," the notebook that doesn't record my children's stories, meetings, medical directives, or transfers. It only keeps my own small things. A still, breezy morning by the lake, the trace of lavender left on my wrist, the shadow I cast on the kitchen floor when I get up at dawn to make tea. The letter lies among those pages like a thread of a different color in the fabric, not pretty, but honest. At noon, I sit at my desk and turn on the computer. There's an old list I wrote before, things to do when I get my breath back. Today's item is anonymous support for 3 families caring for elders at home. I reach out through a small local organization and offer to cover the remaining hospital bills and night caregivers for 6 months, with one condition: don't publish my name. What if they want to know who helped? The coordinator asks. I answer, say it was someone who used to be tired. That's enough. When the transfer confirmations arrive, I exhale. I don't need a photo op. Giving is also a way to speak in my own voice. It doesn't always need a microphone. In the afternoon, I pull the old filing cabinet into the middle of the living room. Oak, heavy, every drawer packed. I spread a cloth on the rug and sit on the floor. Envelopes labeled receipts, pledges, strategy drafts, donor leads. I touch each stack, choosing like I'm choosing seeds. I keep the thank you note from a preschool teacher who brought 10 children to the Haven Ridge Garden for the first time. I keep the wobbly card from a widow. Here, I'm allowed to be silent. The rest plans that grew into something else. Handbooks that no longer fit. Call lists and meet lists I let go of. I put them in the recycling box, tie the string, set it by the door. The room feels lighter, so do I. At dinner, I set a table for one. I take a cream napkin, place a white china plate with a fine hairline crack like an old vein, and pour water into a tall glass. I lay a sprig of rosemary by the plate, not for anyone to see, but to remind myself, respect doesn't begin on a stage. It starts at a table for one. I sit, eat slowly, and listen to the sound of fork on china. It's been a long time since that sounded beautiful. After eating, I write a thank you letter to the Cedar Lake Community Trust Board. I briefly share about Legacy Evening, about people standing in silence to honor a right decision, and I write the most important line, "Thank you for upholding a no nepotism principle in admissions. Haven Ridge can forgive, but its structure is not allowed to forget." I sign, stamp it, and set it by my wallet. I'll mail it in the morning. As night comes, I go to the garden. The rosemary I replanted behind the house has taken root, its cool green scent curling up when I run my hand against the leaves. I start slow steps along the edge of the grass, counting quietly. 1, 2, 3. At 10, I change direction. No calorie goals, no turning it into a workout schedule, just walking to notice my breath. Each time my foot touches ground, I feel my chest open a fraction more. Even breathing is the reward. In the past, breath was proof I was still alive. Today, it's a small joy. Then I stop on the porch and look toward the gate. Strangely, I no longer guard it, no longer listen for tires, guess at shadows, brace my heart for impact. The gate is still there, matte black paint, hinges that whisper when the wind moves it. But now, the gate guards me not with a lock, but with peace. It's like a gentle old watchman reminding me, slow down, choose who comes in, and remember you can sit too, without waiting for anyone. Late, I call Renee. We talk about the pottery class, about Joyce, about those wobbly bowls everyone loves. Come try tomorrow? Renee nudges. I laugh. I'll come tomorrow. I want to throw a little bowl with my own flaw. Then I tell her about the line carved on the stone bench. Renee says, someone probably carved it for herself first, then for others. I think, that's exactly right. At night, I turn on the small, warm kitchen light and write. I write less, because I don't need to record everything anymore. I write just enough to remember the smells, the light, the laughter. I write about the way a middle-aged woman in class put her hands on the clay like on a stray cat, slow, patient, holding back words. I write about the wind through the pines sounding like paper rustling, about a young couple walking by hand in hand, not knowing that a few yards away a woman is learning to begin again at 69. Before bed, I open the Writing About Me notebook again. I tape in a small scrap cut from a rosemary bag, the scent still faint. Under it, I write one line, "Here, I don't prove. I live." Then I close the notebook and set it on the shelf, where the moonlight touches one corner. Past midnight, a light wind rises. I hear the roof hum, the wood flexing like skin when the weather changes. I don't jump up to check the locks anymore. I know I locked them, and more than that, I've sealed the drafts inside me. Worries don't flood in like before, they knock. I recognize them, then let them go. The gate isn't something I cling to now. It's a quiet brace that reminds me with each passing day I'm a little closer to myself. The next morning, I wake early, make a mild coffee, and sit on the steps looking at the lake under a thin veil of fog. I see an older woman pull a small cart past, pause to look into my garden, then smile and nod. I nod back. No words needed. In that small moment, I understand why Joyce insists on calling the class "Make Something Only Your Hands Can Make," because life is the same. No one can throw the pot that holds your peace for you. Others can give clay, water, and a wheel, but the touch has to be yours. In the afternoon, I pass the pottery studio. This time, I push the door open and walk in. The smell of wet clay and the faint trickle at the wash sink greet me. Joyce looks up and smiles. "Here to make your own flawed piece yet?" I answer. "Not sure where the flaw will land, but I'm here to find it." The others shift over and make room for me at a wheel. I roll up my sleeves, set the clay in the center, and press the pedal lightly. The wheel turns, the clay soft under my hands. I don't rush the shape. I just apply enough pressure, listening as my heartbeat falls into rhythm with the spin. Outside the window, the lake glints with a narrow silver streak, like a thread stitching afternoon to evening. At night, I set the table for one again, pour water into the glass, and tuck a lavender sprig in a vase. I look at the note on the fridge, "I am not an asset to be managed," and smile. Turns out, when your voice is back where it belongs, a solo, fate meal can feel as full as a feast. Turns out, when the gate no longer needs you to guard it, it guards you with quiet. So on days you're too tired, you still remember to open a window, let the wind touch your forehead, and say something very soft. That's enough for today, Loretta. Rest. Winter arrives as gently as breath. All of Cedar Lake wears a thin veil of snow, so pristine it seems it would melt at a touch. I brew cinnamon tea, the warm, sweet scent filling the room, and sit by the fireplace listening to the soft crackle like the house's steady heartbeat. Outside the window, the lake is starting to freeze in patches. A few small birds sit on bare branches, fluffing their feathers for warmth. I realize I'm no longer in a rush. No urgent emails, no budgets to review, no meetings I once thought would make the world collapse if I missed them. On the table is the Writing About Me notebook. I open to the last page, pick up my pen, and write the line that closes the story I've been living word by word for months. I'm not waiting for anyone to grant me permission anymore. It's a simple sentence, but each stroke is a year of fear. For years, I lived like a person waiting at a threshold, waiting to be loved, to be accepted, to be nodded through so I could be myself. Now I understand. No one can sign the form that lets you live fully except you. Every Tuesday, I still stop by Havenridge, but not as founder or owner. I go as a friend of the place, bringing cookies, sometimes just to sit in the library and read a few pages, or watch the women in pottery class laugh over the turning wheels. Once, Joyce asked, "Do you feel Havenridge is different now?" I nodded. Different in that it doesn't need me, and it still lives. That made me lighter than any success report I ever got. One afternoon, I get a call from Naomi. Her voice is firm but warm. "Loretta, the civil authority has opened an investigation into Colin and Tessa's financial dealings. We don't need to go to court, just wait for the result." I sit quiet for a moment, then say, "Thank you, Naomi. As for me, I'll let the law handle it." I don't hold grudges anymore. I just hope they learn the lesson I did, that possession is never love. That night, I sit by the window and write 3 letters by hand to Tessa, Jenna, and Colin. Plain paper, my handwriting a little shaky but steady. "My children, I'm not asking for an apology, and I'm not blaming you. When you're ready to speak with respect, I'm here. Not to lecture, but to listen. I'm still your mother, but now I'm a mother who keeps her boundaries." I fold the 3 letters and seal them. I'm not sure they'll read them, but that's no longer the point. Some words need to be said so the heart has room to breathe, not to make someone answer. Night falls faster in snow season. I light a candle, put on instrumental music, and write a short passage in my notebook as if for a future reader, maybe a woman sitting in a quiet house where loneliness mingles with regret. If someone is reading this, remember, you have the right to set boundaries even with the people you love. That isn't selfish, it's how you keep your humanity from dissolving into someone else's. Real love doesn't need a deed of ownership. I set down the pen and closed the notebook. The fireplace is still glowing, the fire reflecting a warm gold on the wall like skin. Outside, snow falls so slowly it feels like time is sitting here having tea with me. I look toward the lake and see my faint reflection under the thin mist, an ordinary woman with graying hair who no longer needs permission to be herself. I smile. This story, at last, belongs to me. Not a report, not evidence, not an argument. Just the story of someone who stopped trying to be loved the right way and started loving herself the right way. I set down my teacup and let the cinnamon mingle with the scent of burning wood. Winters are always cold at Cedar Lake, but I know something inside me is warming a fire that needs no kindling, only courage. I add one last line in my journal, like a message to myself and to anyone who's lived through collapse. Don't be afraid of losing someone. Be most afraid of losing yourself while trying to keep them. Then I close the notebook, lean back, and exhale slowly. Outside, the snow keeps falling, but inside me, the sky just broke into sun. Thank you truly for staying with me to these very last lines. If you're still here, maybe somewhere in this story you recognized a part of yourself, someone who once loved with everything, was hurt, and still chose to stand up with gentleness and self-respect. I want to ask you one thing. Where are you listening from? A small kitchen glowing warm, or a quiet room with only a lamp and your heartbeat? Wherever you are, I hope you know you are not alone. If any detail impressed us, when we of action relax my dawn, my journey made you pause, remember, or feel a small ache, please share one line in the comments. Who knows, your small story might be the light someone needs to walk through their own darkness. And if you want to keep going with me with the women, mothers, and fathers who have lost but refuse to fall, please hit follow or tap like. Every comment and every heart you leave is a warm beat that helps this story travel farther and touch more souls who need a hug made of words. I'm grateful to you, from the deepest place in me, for listening, for feeling, and for staying. Because sometimes, just having one person stop with us in the long night is enough to believe we were never truly alone.